Hey folks, it's S.Blanchard. Welcome to Who's That Leader in the Mirror? For over 30 years, I have dabbled in the leadership field that culminated in a search for the perfect leadership philosophy. But as I like to say, I'm still growing up and I have so much to learn. So partly because I live in a remote area of the world, I've decided to make this podcast a shared classroom where we'll take a deep dive into leadership. How being authentic doesn't necessarily mean you're a better leader. We'll have conversations around identity, ego, and humility, about being courageous and value-centered leadership. We'll chat with leaders who understand that who they are, their identity, their sense of self, values, and beliefs are integral to their leadership approach. They're leaders who want to make changes in their approach to become a better version of themselves and realize that they need to reconcile who they are with what they do and how that's golden. It's the golden key to living their leadership approach authentically. I have cast a wide net of friends and colleagues, those I have worked with and have a tremendous amount of awe and respect for. So who's that leader in the mirror today? In this episode, we are joined by Augy J, another longtime friend who's transforming cultures and organizations one soul at a time through Empathize Others, a globally inclusive lens platform encouraging authentic empathy methods. Augy shares the challenges of being the funkier of boardrooms, the need to understand the over-politicalization of diversity, to accept otherness, and the value of being uniquely you. Wow, there's so much packed into this episode. You won't want to miss it. Alrighty, well, here we are. How are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Well, Sharon, it's always nice to see you, and I could talk about leadership type stuff forever. So no, I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, and just before we started, we were talking about, the last time you and I saw each other physically was at the Women in Excellence events, and, about supporting women in their leadership roles through athletics. And I think we've always had some incredible commonalities, and I've always really looked up to you as, as an academic, as a leader, as a friend, and just so happy to have you here today. So I want to dive right in and and just, the first thing I wanted to you've had some amazing changes in the last few years, and you're doing some, dynamo work in Halifax. And so just, can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing now, but Empathize Others? I'm just so enthralled by all of your work around Empathize Others.
Yeah, it was interesting because I've always, probably from a teenager, was involved in community. I like the word engagement. I don't know about activism or things like that. I think engagement would be part of it. And so I've always was a public speaker. And I think it's funny, the people that know me, like, I would be a professional extrovert, but a personal introvert, really. But I would say the public facing side was often doing these talks. And it was after, I taught 10 years in the Caribbean. I taught in the School of Ed at St. X. I was working at the Department of Ed, and finally I thought, okay, am I at the consultant stage yet? Can I stop doing things for free? And really, I'm being facetious with that, because I think, Sharon, you have to organize yourself before you can start to say that people have to pay you. So really came up with a curriculum, and the Empathize Others kind of concept was, for me, as a privileged male, as a privileged Anglophone in Nova Scotia, as a privileged heterosexual, as a privileged able-bodied person, I thought that the my talk track, and my parents being civil rights activists, people often expected me to be talking about issues around the Afrocentricity and the life of someone who's of African ancestry. And that I just thought, no, there's real value, especially in 2000, from 2018 to 2000 now, or in the last 5 years, we've had Me Too, we've had George Floyd, we've had All Lives Matter in residential schools and finding graves at schools. We've had, the LGBTQ plus and queer and trans folk talking about what their life is like. And so I really felt that empathize others was a concept, empathize being a verb, like, get out of your own way and see other people's stuff. And that would seem to me a more inclusive platform for me. And it's worked well over the last 3 years.
Yeah. Do people get it? And what I mean by that is, I just read a quote and it on LinkedIn and it was an article, and within the article, it said, investing in empathy equals investing in performance. So how do you authentically do it without a cap, without that look of, at the end of the day, we still need to get out of our people what we need to get out of our people. So how do you make it authentic and real? And do people get it?
Yeah, I think there's two sides of it. For me, who's now, a principal or head of operations at a trade school, a college, I think that I'm actively there more to have an effect on people. And so performance and change management and work culture, I think I'm more actively involved with that daily from Monday to Friday. So I do look for some change there. I think when people hire me to do a session with their company, I'm such a drop in the bucket as far as bringing me in for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever it is. I don't have a whole lot of expectations because I do think it's up to that particular organization to follow up and hold themselves accountable and do things that they need to do. So I have two different ways of looking at it. My leadership style daily is to own my own stuff, to not micromanage people and allow them to grow. And it's funny how if you see yourself as just the water and the sun, and if there's good soil, people grow. And so I just have more opportunities to put sunlight on people and water on good soil at my workplace than I do when people hire me to speak to their particular, staff about inclusive culture.
And so when you go in and you're helping people understand what it means to empathize others, walk us through that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Sharon. I think I've come to the realization that from the very beginning, if people do not feel a part of the conversation, they tune out. Being a person of African ancestry, and I come from a perspective of here's what it's like to be in Black skin, and we're in a racist society, and all these, and some of these things are true, but you can't start with that. So what I do is I walk through almost depoliticizing the word diversity. And I just say that the whole world is diverse. Look at biosystems and ecosystems. The more diverse a pond is, the more diverse an ocean is, the more diverse a piece of farmland is, the more fertile it is. We think about how, and you just mentioned it, like seasons and how where you're living now, the seasons are different than when they were here. We appreciate those differences. And then I often bring it to, just saying at first that diversity is everywhere. Diversity is like breathing air. So if you politicize it and say, oh, we don't want to talk diversity, that's a real left-wing tool of what? It's that everybody's different. And so right now, the superpower of leadership, and I know that fits with the theme of your podcast, the superpower of leadership is empathizing others. It's being able to hear, even though I'm a heterosexual person, when I own that privilege, I can hear the LGBTQ plus voice much more clear. When I own my settler history in Nova Scotia, because yes, African Nova Scotian people have been in Nova Scotia for 400 years, but not as long in Mi'kma'ki as Indigenous people, which is thousands of years. So the more I own my privileges, so I go into talks with companies around talking about the advantage of inclusive thinking, the wellness advantage, the relational advantage, the productivity advantage, that everybody has money. And the more you're open to everyone, if you're looking to make profit, it's a lot better to open up your viewpoint and include more people rather than exclude. And we have a history in society of excluding people. Oh, you're a woman, you can't vote. 1950s. You're in a same-sex marriage, same-sex couple, you can't get married. In fact, we will exclude you from having a relationship. We will make your relationship illegal. These are facts. That Black people were excluded. So the opposite of an exclusionary history is now a future of inclusion. And I use that purposely, where you're included in things. So when I talk to people about the nature of diversity, and how natural it is, and that, that your superpower is, how do you get along with people that don't think like you, that don't look like you, and that don't act like you? That you come out of that's leadership, right? It is when you can deal with otherness. In 2023, that is the superpower. And so I talk to companies from that point of view, almost like a real, I call it spiritual logic, like
Tell me about that.
Well, there's some things when you read, it's not a new story when you read around Buddhism and Hinduism and you read Christianity, not really from a religious point of view, but just read it as the Bible is a sacred book or whatever, any type of, sacred kind of text, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the Bible, all of these books talk about love, and they talk about self-love, and they talk about how much can you understand and empathize and walk in other people's shoes and turn the other cheek. And all these concepts are not new, they're ancient concepts.
Yeah.
But I think that we've gotten into a world which we strangely call civilized, right? Which may not be civilized. I mean, the way that we act on social media, the way that we behave around each other with all these fancy cars and big houses and fancy stuff, like we've lost. I remember Rastaman said to me once when I was teaching in the Caribbean, all it takes is losing petroleum and electricity and everyone's back to the 1800s. Right. So let's not get caught up in electricity and petroleum and gas and driving cars and being on the internet, because as we know from storms, all it takes is electricity's gone and we're like, oh my God, what do we do? Or, there's lineups at the gas station, you can't drive your car. But there's life beyond that, and what's beyond that is this humanness that I really feel we have to get back to. Empathize others is around that. The way I speak about leadership is around it. There's a humanness that we have to get back to.
Yeah. I feel like if you could see, if it was New Year's Eve, I know we can see each other, but folks listening in can't, but there would be like a gazillion fireworks going off in my, right? I'm just like, boom, boom, boom. Wow. I want to talk about that. Bang, bang. It's just, right. Oh my gosh. There's so many things I want to go back 10 times and talk about, because, even the over politicization of the word diversity, I never thought about that till you just said it.
Yeah.
And it's like, once that that veil comes down and you're like, oh, bloody hell. Right.
It's so basic.
But it's almost like next level. We've, how, when we move through these levels of understanding and greater, higher, whatever level thinking, but it's like, man, we've got to just get back, your connectedness to biodiversity and just the natural sciences. Why have we taken this word and totally misused it and to a point where people don't even understand what it means anymore?
No, and you're right though, Sharon, and they've narrowed it. And I'm not even talking as an English teacher. Diversity does not mean left and right wing and this thing that you're a social justice warrior. No, diversity is also, and here's another concept, diversity of thought. And I'll bring this to you. I did a session today with a company and I brought this to them. So we often, and I saw this during, the COVID and everyone being online, and I would see these threads of people arguing, whether it was about Black Lives Matter or about, the indigenous rights of indigenous people in Canada or wherever. And I would think so diversity of thought means that no two people think the same, right? If again, I'm trying to be logical. Twins don't think the same. So how ludicrous is it that we get online and we argue with people and get mad that they don't think like us.
Right.
Duh. No one thinks like you. If
Right.
we at least owned the uniqueness and diversity that I respect and I've always respected you, and this is over a long period of time, 30 plus years, because of who you are. You're Sharon. I know you from when we were in university, and you were an individual. You were a strong woman. You were confident. You were like, there was energy that you had that was uniquely you. And I also know Brian. I know your husband. He had his unique energy. Everyone has it. And so because we've lost what it means to love diversity, we don't go into conversations realizing if I'm talking to someone who's a Trump supporter, I can listen to them, Sharon. They have the right to their own thoughts. They have the right to be where they are and be unique in their thinking. They don't have to think like me. And we've got this real toxic viewpoint, and it's a very narrow viewpoint that everyone should think like you, and we feel like us, like me.
Yeah.
And so you think that if people don't see things through your filter, there's a negativity to that. That's madness.
Yeah.
It really is. So instead, I can listen to anyone. And I said this today, Donald Trump is not the devil. There are things about Trump that I would say I'm not adverse to when I think about immigration. And my first marriage, I married someone from the Bahamas. It took her 3-4 years to get her citizenship. So the concept of trying to control immigration and at least make it fair for everyone, I'm okay with that. I think there's some value to that. Likewise, I don't think Barack Obama is a saint. Right? I'm a thinker. I'm a unique thinker. Everybody is. And so with that, I allow people their space to have diverse thought. So as I talk through this, you'll see like the more that I believe in the diversity of life and I value that, I don't need people to be like me. I don't need people to think like me. I don't need people to talk like me. I would rather just be myself authentically and be open to the diversity of thought, that the beautiful diversity of thought. I don't get angry at other people's thoughts. I don't get, I can't believe you think that. Well, I don't care what I'll listen to what you think, but I'm not politicizing that.
Yeah.
Because it's logical that it's diverse.
We're so conditioned to do that. How do you not do it?
Well, I think, but this is the talk track. It's a mindset, and there's a space, and empathize others that's why it's called that. I think I go into these corporate spaces, and I get them to start to think about, like, I will show pictures, Sharon, high def pictures of like parrots and fish, all different crazy colors and da-da-da. And I'm walking through grown adults and they're all going, wow, they're looking at the pictures. I go, we love diversity, don't we? And then I put a picture up of all different colored humans. And I said, until we get to humanity, we love diversity. We love different restaurants. We love different books. We love different music. We love all kinds of different stuff, different colors. And the only thing we don't love difference in is humans.
Yeah. And what do they do? Isn't it crazy?
Well, we're conditioned to think like that. And it's funny, I bring that same slideshow, I tweak it a bit, but I had a group of grade 4s and 5s during Black History Month that I did the same slide deck. And it was funny because as I was showing all the animals, they were like, ooh, they're so innocent in their love of things, which I want to remain like a grade 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Anyway, as soon as I got to the human thing, and I said, okay, you guys, why do you think that for humans, we don't like difference? The answers were brilliant. Even 6 and 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds know that we compete, that we're socialized, that we stereotype, that we believe in hierarchies. So we have to challenge this way of thinking so that when I see someone in a wheelchair, I automatically feel sorry for them. But yet people in wheelchairs are saying, don't feel sorry for me.
Yeah.
Like, stop that. Right? When I see someone who's trans or queer, right? We have this autopilot where we will see a human who's different or has a hijab on, or is an older person, or is speaking another language. And we automatically, within milliseconds, attach all of these things that we don't even know the person, right? But yet we attach all these things, and we do it with humans.
Yeah.
We don't do it with cats and dogs and we just do it with humans, and we've been conditioned. And if you think about much of the turmoil in the world, it's a lack of humans being able to deal with other humans. Yeah, so the diversity, the way I try to spread out this diversity conversation is that, we love colored pencils and Crayola crayons because there's 100 different colors. Like, we have that in us that we love diversity. So can we take that same love of diversity and apply it to human beings? Please. Can we just start to do that?
Yeah.
And allow people their space to be themselves, not say that people have to think the way we think they should be thinking. And we all do that. Left wing, right wing. We all have a sense where you should be thinking like me.
Yeah.
I don't believe in that. I don't think that's healthy.
No way, right? I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, I'm so guilty of that. Right?
I am too, though. And I don't want to be on a pedestal here either, Sharon, and preach, because that's not what it is. I'm at 54 years old trying to figure out, I'm trying to divide my life into 4 basketball quarters, right? First quarter is 1 to 25. I had a pretty good first quarter. Second quarter, 25 to 50, 2 marriages. I was kind of, not the greatest quarter. I think I got down by 20. But then now I'm in my third quarter, and I'm okay with trying to figure this stuff out now in the third quarter. And if I'm blessed to live into the third, fourth quarter further, I do. But I think back to a lot of the readings that I've done, and these are ancient readings. It's so funny. Like, I would read things that are translated or from thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, and they're saying, treat people with respect. Get out of your own way. I've read several books on the ego and how the ego operates in our mind, because it's that inner talk track, isn't it?
Right.
That creates stereotypes and hierarchies, and we judge people from it's that inner talk. And so I'm guilty of that same inner talk, and I realize that, but I just make sure that may be my first thought, but it's not my last thought.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting better at. So when I see a woman, I remember I was taking a women's studies course at X, and the professor said to all the males in the room, I want you to go through, and it was a Friday or a Thursday class, and he said, for the weekend, I want you to go through as a male, and every woman you see, don't objectify her. Don't see her as a object of your desire or someone that you can. And it was an eye-opener, because that was hard to do at 19, 20 years old. And it was an eye-opener for me around mindset.
Yeah.
And so I think we're all in a mindset. So we're never going to be without those thoughts. But don't make your first thought what you stick on. Kind of go grrr, and just shake yourself out of that and get to this space.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just, it's funny because ego, so much of my own work is focused around ego and letting go of the ego. And I'll never forget when I read All About Love by Bell Hooks for the first time, transformed my life, right? Yeah. She, and just absolutely, and so emptying the ego to allow there to be space for others, right?
Yes.
And that's the biggest thing, is that mindset and that practice, and just, getting rid of myself. And that's why, for this, for me, the leadership in the mirror, it's, reconciling when you go and you're brushing your teeth at night and you're looking in that mirror, can I reconcile who I am across everything I do? And can I look at myself and know with integrity that I did the best that I could do today? Right.
Being compassionate with ourselves too, Sharon, because I find that too. We often read the self-awareness books and rest in peace, Bell Hooks, with the small case B, small case H, that even blew my mind. But
I think and I don't know if you've taken that on, but I do, because I live that. That's who I want to be. I want to be a small s, small b.
Yeah. And lowercase.
People change it all the time, but that small little gesture, right? Maybe
it speaks to being egoless, doesn't it? That she would have her name as small b, small h is a part of that. And what's interesting though, you're making these firecrackers go off in my head too, because when you think about why we do that with humans, the ego is often the reason why, right? Because how we will see someone and that calculation is the ego thing. And I've done a lot of reading around ego, similar to you. I know you write about it, but I've read, and it's like, it's self-preserving. It's it's self-protective, it's doubtful. Like your ego is not a good, it's not a good filter to look at the world, because your ego is something that is it's an inner thought filter that brings you away from people. If you listen to your ego, you will be in a house all by yourself in a mountain somewhere away from people. That and the ego would be so happy that you isolated yourself, because if you are going to interact with other human beings, you have to stop listening to your ego, because your ego will say, oh, don't trust her. Oh, look at him. Why is he like, that's the type of talk track that the ego brings to you. And it actually filters people out and excludes people.
Yeah.
And being egoless is to include people.
Yeah.
And I think we all have an ego. So you have to be able to, I think the thoughts never stop coming is my point.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that, oh, that's the ego talking to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And putting that into practice, right? Going into the boardroom or the classroom. I did this in my own teaching. And I remember saying, I'm leaving my ego at the door, right? When I come in, I'm about facilitating. I might be the content expert, but this is about enabling everyone around me to take away something and for us all to become, a better version of ourselves, or have more knowledge, or whatever the goal is, or, you know what I mean? But it was that so that everyone benefits, and it's not about me standing up how we would have learned, right?
Yes. Yeah,
with,
for sure.
That right. And no engagement. And it's more about enabling, empowering, understanding. And that's why I love and empathizing, right?
Empathizing others. And it seems so simple, but you have certain concepts that come to you. Like this came to me and I was like, okay, I like that. And the other thing is, I think that when you talk about leadership, so I was working with the government before I got this job at the college, and I took executive leadership courses, and it was with a cohort of people from all different departments. It was over 9 months. And to be honest, Sharon, it started to get repetitive. Like most of the courses had this, what they may call an EDI focus, which I'm a little weary of that acronym and how people are politicizing it and squeezing it and doing whatever. And then they call it JEDI, or all the different ways they're twisting that around. I just started to think like, okay, what you just described, Sharon, around you go in the classroom and your job is to energize other people. Right. In the 70s, leadership was very hierarchical. So if I was a tenured prof, or I was a CEO, or once you get to that position, as they used to say in our community, your shit don't stink. Like all of a sudden now you're in a space that, and that's not what leadership is. There's two things I've come to believe about leadership. One is it's definitely about empowering and enabling and facilitating. And you said that. The other piece it is, it's dirty and unpopular.
That's right.
If you're a real leader,
talk about that.
and people do not. And I remember being in spaces and where they had leadership academies and leadership and da-da-da. And I thought like there was an ego piece to that. Like, oh, we're in the leadership academy. Like I get that. Yeah, to a certain extent, but leadership, as I found out from being a parent, from being a principal, from being a director at the Department of Ed, is you often have to tell people no, or make decisions that are unpopular. And the more I started to lead, the more I realized that I was unpopular a lot. Now, a lot of times that unpopularity turned into growth, and I went back with the person and we got it. But there are times and spaces that as a leader, you're going to say things that need to be said. And I remember my mom telling me when I was young, like the truth can offend people. So we can't judge by people being offended. Because I could say to someone, your breast stinks. Yeah. And obviously that's a crass example, but if it does, they may still be offended by that. And so I use that analogy because oftentimes for me, being an African Nova Scotian in Nova Scotia and sitting at tables where there's very few Black faces, I will often say something that represents my community. And I call myself the funkier of rooms. It will funky up the room because people don't want to talk about that. It's too complex, and it makes me unpopular at many tables. But I know that in leadership and representing my community and their viewpoint, I'm not a leader if I sit at that table and I don't say anything that is going to change the trajectory. So I'll be a funkier of rooms.
Yeah.
Just because because I'm not looking to be popular.
Yeah.
Leaders are not popular.
And it's hard to be that person, right? It's like I've recently realized I've been an outlier my whole life, right? I'm that person in that room shaking things up and, creating or having the courage to be vulnerable. And we talked about that, before, but it's that vulnerable space, right? And, I've really struggled with that. I've really struggled with that because I have a real challenge of, we all do, but personally of wanting to be accepted, wanting to be loved, wanting to be, right? It's all those, but when you go into that space, if you're going to be that person who's going to push that, right? Whatever it is, if you're going to question, if you're going to put your hand up and say, no, I don't think this is right.
Yeah.
You're not going to make friends. And so it's bloody hell. Right.
Well, yeah. And there's this, as you're speaking, I mean, I'm listening and absorbing what you're saying. And of course, you and I have been on the same wavelength for a very long time, but it's sacrificial, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Like, that you're going to, so it's vulnerable, but it's also, I'm going to sacrifice being popular. I'm going to sacrifice people saying, oh, well, like, so that when I bring up this comment that I'm about to bring up, I know that I'm sacrificing, at least temporarily, my reputation, how people feel about me. I'm no longer a good guy. Like all these things are going to happen, but I'm willing to do that because oftentimes in the same way you sit in spaces, Sharon, where you're representing people beyond yourself. And I got that from my mom and dad too, is that when you're in committees or you're in a position of leadership, there's often a multitude of people behind you that you went to junior high with, that you went to high school, that are now custodians or police people, or they're in different spaces. So when you're at those tables, if you don't sacrifice yourself and you protect yourself and you just stay quiet and collect the good money or however you say it, I personally can't do that. Maybe if there's people that don't feel marginalized, they're comfortable with that. I've always felt a necessity and a courage to sacrifice my popularity to bring up a point that I think should be talked about in the room.
Yeah. Amen. Because you know what? I've never even thought about it in that way. And bloody heck, it really does make sense, doesn't it? I always wish that maybe I should have just been that person who could have just shut her mouth and sat by and, and then I would have sat around in spaces and got promoted. I was actually thinking of this morning going, if I didn't leave that position or walk away from that place or just, shut my mouth once in a while, I probably could have had a different career path, but I don't think I could have lived with myself.
And isn't it though? Like, because I'll give you another concept that we are not our jobs.
Yeah, that's
right?
so
think
hard,
about that, right?
Right.
Like, and we often think that, especially as we get a little bit upwardly mobile, etc. We think that we're our jobs, but ultimately, when we go home, we are wives, we are husbands, we are uncles, we are dads, we are moms. Like that part you can't escape. Your job title is clearly not who you are. So when we're going to work and it becomes all about work, that's a little imbalanced, I think. And so I'm willing to, the same way if you leave a job, you're replaceable. Well, being in a situation that does not allow you, because here's the other beautiful part, Sharon. I've also been in spaces where I said something that I thought was going to be controversial, but it landed correctly. And the people in the room said, you know what, Augie, thank you for that. Or yeah, I never thought about that. Like I've had those occasions happen too, where you only sacrifice, isn't it? I just thought about this now. It's ironic that you sacrifice in the room that needs it the most. Right? Right. If the room didn't need it, you wouldn't be making a sacrifice because everyone around you would rally and go, wow, that's a different thought, but yeah, we appreciate that, and you don't lose your popularity. And it's not about being popular. You don't lose your value to the room. No, but if you say something and your value goes down, I always know that's a real litmus test for, okay, I needed to drop that. Yeah. Because if people are angry about that concept, then I'm doing the right thing, because
Right.
I need you to think about this concept.
This is incredibly therapeutic for me. Bloody heck. I'm very egocentric in my approach to this podcast. It's feeding my soul. Your words are feeding my soul. And it's just fantastic. I'm so grateful.
Well, I appreciate the invitation though, too, because I always look forward to talking to you. And I want to remind you, when the last time I really saw you, I was dropping my dad's book off to your house.
Oh, that's right.
And you bought them for your daughters.
Yeah. And my son, I bought 4.
Yeah.
And Colleen Nolan.
So that was, and I thought about that before when I was coming up to get on the thing. It was women in leadership, and you and Brian were there, and we were all at X, but I drove in Halifax. I drove to your house.
That's right.
And your daughter was at home.
Yeah.
And I dropped her off 4 of my dad's memoirs.
That's right. Beautiful. I have one sitting with me here in New Zealand.
Good.
I wanted to make sure that I could give one to each of my kids. And then, beautiful. That's so cool. Listen, you know what the hardest part is about this podcast is ending it for today.
Yes.
I feel like this is just the beginning of a great conversation, and we need to continue it. And we could talk. That's the hardest part, is we could talk on and on and on. But I know our listeners probably have like a,
of course,
threshold. They're like, okay, you two, you right. But listen, Bud, so great to see you and to talk to you, and just so appreciate our conversation, and let's continue it. I look forward to it.
Well, I thank you, Sharon, once again, and please give Brian a big hug for me. I really appreciate your energy, and again, we're going to be on more, but if people do want to, see some of the podcasts that I have, some of the blogs, you can go to empathizeothers.com. Instagram is empathize_others. And on LinkedIn, which is, professional Facebook, you can always get me at AUGY, Augy Jones. And I like to, and I only put that out there because I love networking. So because you're in New Zealand and you've got a wide cast of a net of those people that are listening, I just want to put it out there that I'd love to connect with those people.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you, my darling.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Take care.
Talk soon. Have you ever had one of those moments when you feel the roof could have just been blown into space? Things won't ever be the same way again? That's how I'm feeling. Thank you, Augy, for sharing the need to reframe diversity, helping us to understand how we can be the water and the sun, nourishing the soil, holistically building our leadership superpower. Just wow. Join us next week for my chat with Dr. Shelley-Ann Scott. She's an academic leadership guru, a leadership savant with a photographic memory to boot. I was her doctoral student, where I have to say I was daunted, a wee bit scared, and in awe of her all at the same time. She challenged me beyond anything I could ever imagine.